It seems as if we are being ushered into a new era of MMA, an era where wrestlers are beginning to retake over the UFC. For the longest time, wrestlers dominated the sport, and the style they used to do so, it was, what can I say? It was beautiful. And what it boiled down to was just get a hold of your opponent. That's it. If you were the superior wrestler, if you were fighting a striker, just grab them. Just get a hold of them, and then the rest was already done. You were going to manhandle them. You were going to take them down. You were going to lay them flat on their backs. You were going to drape your body over them, skin-to-skin contact, and you were going to stay there for all 5 rounds. It was elegant. It was beautiful. It was sensual, and it was effective. But there was a period in time where strikers were seeming to turn the tides. You had Leon Edwards defeat Kamaru Usman twice and Colby Covington. 2 of which, these guys were seen to be the best wrestlers in the entire division. Then you had Sean O'Malley knock out Aljamain Sterling, which was a feat at the time that nobody thought he was capable of. But since then, it does seem like the tide is beginning to shift. And I think the main reason for this is there are 2 styles of wrestling that currently exist in MMA. There's an old school style and there is a new school style. And the old school style, it just doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't. And the new school style, it's superior. Look at guys like Daniel Cormier, Stipe Miocic, Michael Chandler, Usman, Colby Covington. What did all of these guys have in common? They were all pure wrestlers. They all came from wrestling backgrounds, and in MMA, they primarily just used wrestling. And again, at the time these guys reigned dominant, this worked out fine. But quickly, problems arose with this style, and I think the main issue with it is none of these guys really had any finishing ability on the ground. They didn't. Let's look at when Leon Edwards fought Usman and Colby Covington. Colby and Usman, neither of them necessarily had a problem taking Leon down. Both of them had done it multiple times. But the problem was Leon would turtle to his knees and he would stand back up every single time. And if you look at the MMA scoring criteria, it is clear that they are looking for actions that contribute to the end of the fight. And control time does not contribute to the end of the fight. What they're looking for is essentially damage, submission attempts, or advancing in position, such as taking someone's back or going to mount. But just getting on top of them for a brief period of time, that does not count for anything. But with all those old school wrestlers I had named prior, this wasn't a problem because they were taking down strikers at will. But what we're seeing now in MMA is guys are becoming more and more and more well-rounded at the top of the sport. So now all of a sudden strikers, they're much harder to take down. They're much harder to keep down. And now all of a sudden this style, it just doesn't really work the same way. I think a great example of this is Michael Chandler versus Dustin Poirier. Michael Chandler, during that fight, hit some of the craziest takedowns I have ever seen. He lifted Dustin Poirier in the air from a pistol squat position, slammed him, but then, Dustin turtles to his knees. Chandler goes to take his back, and it looked horrible. It looked really, really bad. You could tell this is just not a very refined skill set of his because he it looked like shit, and he ended up on the bottom. And, again, looking at Kamaru Usman and Colby versus Leon, every single time they took him down, Leon would just turtle to his knees and stand back up every single time. But what did Belal Muhammad do against Leon? He would take Leon down. Leon would do the exact same thing. He turtles, tries to get back up, but that's what Belal was waiting for. He was waiting for Leon to turtle so he could stay behind him, slide both his hooks in, and put a body triangle on him. There is no question the body triangle is the most controlling position in all of grappling. If you want to secure somebody for the entire round, you have to use this in your game. You absolutely have to. But that old school wrestling style I talked about, all of those guys I listed, that is just not a factor of their games. They wouldn't do it because at the time they didn't need to. But that was the absolute biggest difference maker when you look at Belal Muhammad versus Leon and Colby and Usman versus Leon. The second Belal took his back and put that body triangle on, it was like, okay, this is different. This is different, and now he can win this fight. And of course, I attribute Belal evolving his game because of all the work he put in with Team Habib. All of those guys, this is exactly what they're looking for. Islam Makhachev is always going to take your back with the body triangle. Umar was going for it against Corey Sandhagen. And when you look at the highest level of grappling today, which is ADCC, this is the style you see. Wrestling and back takes. The back is the most controlling position, period. And I think another great example of a wrestler who is evolving in MMA, Khamzat Chimaev. Now, Khamzat Chimaev also comes from a lengthy freestyle wrestling background, but he does not just try to take you down and lay on top of you. This guy is always hunting for your back, always hunting for submissions. I mean, look, when he fought Kamaru Usman was never going to get Khamzat into a position like this. It is just not part of his game. And, another crazy thing, Khamzat had a grappling match against Luke Rockhold a few months ago. And now Luke Rockhold, there is nobody who gets more hyped up about their jiu-jitsu than Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold's grappling is so overhyped that he even got an invitation to compete at the Craig Jones Invitational. He kind of got smashed, but still, everybody says he has ADCC level grappling. Khamzat worked him. And you know how he did it? Khamzat played guard. He played guard. He was spinning underneath into leg lock attempts, using it to sweep to get on top. This is just another level of grappling, all right? Khamzat is not just sticking with what he's good at, which is purely getting takedowns and purely pinning his opponent. He is becoming, an extremely well-rounded grappler. And this kind of style of take you down, take your back, and choke you, that is the meta of MMA, and Khamzat is doing it in a way that is frankly terrifying. And I think the last big thing we need to look at when it comes to wrestlers evolving in MMA is how they manage distance. Now, this is something that I've talked about in depth many, many times on the channel, but when you look at just straight up wrestling, wrestling in college, wrestling in the Olympics, what that teaches you to do is to finish takedowns. It teaches you of when you get a hold of somebody, how to get them down. But the problem is, in MMA, it is so different. Getting deep on takedowns, it is completely different. It is its own unique skill that those wrestling disciplines just don't teach you about. I mean, why did Peter Yan take Sean O'Malley down 6 times? Because he is an elite striker. He used his striking to get on the inside, get in Sean's face, and get deep on takedowns. But when Sean fought Aljamain Sterling, the better grappler than Peter Yan, Aljo just couldn't close the distance for the life of him. Sean was constantly moving, circling, teeping, feinting, and, every single time Aljo shot in that fight, Sean saw it coming from a mile away because he just couldn't close distance effectively, and he was ready to defend the takedowns. Well, what did Merab Dvalishivili do? Merab was the one dominating the distance management. He was staying away from Sean. He was not overextending. He was not putting himself in a bad position. He was forcing Sean to have to make something happen, and every time Sean stepped in with a right hand, that is when Merab went to work. Merab immediately was able to get extremely deep on takedowns because he was making Sean overextend, and he was the one dominating the distance management. And on top of that, when the hell has Merab ever gone for submissions? Well, he put Sean in a deep guillotine, pulled guard with it, forced Sean to have to go to his back to escape, and it allowed Merab to get on top in another instance. And, that is what it all comes down to. These wrestlers, they're becoming more well-rounded. The old school style that, Daniel Cormier was famous for. Take you down, get on top of you, keep you there. That doesn't work anymore. That doesn't work because strikers, their takedown defense is getting better. They typically manage distance better than wrestlers. And, guys like that have no ability to stop them from turtling and getting back up. But this new style of wrestling we're seeing, that's the meta of MMA, I think. And again, I think it goes back and forth. I think the tides will turn again. And it just all depends on how pure strikers adjust to this new grappling style.